frequently asked question amongst gecko keepers is, can you feed off Crested Gecko diet powders such as Repashy and Pangea without actually adding any water to them? Now, some people tell you that yeah, that's fine, and other people tell you that if you so much as try it, your gecko's going to die of dehydration. In these reptile keeping debates, not many people ever take a middle ground. Now then, here on this channel, I don't particularly like to just take people's advice unless they can back it up with a good bit of science or some significant anecdotal evidence. But this is one of those cases where neither of those things was apparent. And so, over a year ago now, I actually set out to test for myself whether I could use Crested Gecko diet powders without actually adding any water to them. So in today's video, I'm going to be discussing the results of this experiment. So as we get into it, please subscribe to the channel and let's look at what I've found. Now, before I actually discuss the results of the experiment and answer the question that we've set out to answer in today's video, it is important that I do tell you exactly what I did in the experiment so that you actually understand where I'm coming from with all this. Firstly, the Crested Gecko Splat has unlimited access to water via a water bowl that I leave in his enclosure at all times. Contrary to what many people tell you, Crested Geckos can recognise standing water to drink from, and so it is a good idea to leave standing water in their enclosure whether you are feeding them their food wet or dry. What this means for our experiment though is that if Splat was getting dehydrated from eating his food dry, then any sort of minor symptoms he could relieve himself of by just going for a drink. The next point that I'll draw your attention to is that my Crested Gecko is offered about 50% of his diet as insect matter, which is in line with something that I've discussed in a previous video that I'll link in the top right hand corner of the screen right now. I also feed him about twice a week in the winter, one feed insects and one feed fruit paste, powder, whatever you want to call it, and then in the summer I up that to about 3 or 4 feeds a week. Now, basically the point to make here is that he is going to be getting some hydration from the insect portion of his diet, so that is something to take note of. And the final point to make about this experiment is that I haven't just ran it with my one Crested Gecko, but I've actually been running it with my line day geckos too, since I got them back in April 2019. In terms of everything else, these geckos are very similar to Crested Geckos. I mean, they've got different sort of day-night habits and that, but in terms of diet and general care, they are very similar, so I thought it would be entirely appropriate to include them in on this. So quite simply, the first conclusion that we can draw here is that I've been doing this experiment for a long time and absolutely none of my geckos have showed any signs of dehydration in this time. Really, what I think we can draw from that is that provided you're offering a balanced diet, including insect matter, you're giving your geckos access to water so that they can drink when they want, and you are keeping that humidity high, well, not too high, but as high as it should be, with regular spray downs, then the issue of dehydration isn't really a big one, especially when it comes to small tropical species like these. So really, in a nutshell, we've probably already answered the question of can you feed it dry, but in all of this, I'd say that the most important question to be asking is, should you feed it dry? Now, when we talk about this, it's a sort of a different argument because obviously you can feed it dry and not have any ill effects, but whether you should feed it dry is a completely different question, and I do have a different response to that. When I first set out on this experiment offering dry food, my Crested Gecko Splat did actually take to it really well straight away. He was licking his bowl clean, I was putting it in quite regularly, and he was just eating that powder and really seeming to enjoy it. But then a couple of months down the line, he sort of lost his appetite for it and would only take it with the water in, and currently I am just giving it with water in. From this, I would actually draw the opinion that it's probably a good idea to vary it every once in a while. So like I say, right now I am putting water in it, but in a couple of weeks' time I might change it up again to leaving it dry once more, and I'll come back and tell you how I've got on with that. Really, I think that just changing the amount of water that you're putting in with the food is just offering a bit more variety to your animal and giving them something else to enjoy or look forward to, just trying out different flavours and textures. I suppose it's like of a morning when I'm eating my cereal for my breakfast. Sometimes I have lots of milk on it and have it quite watery, and other times I like having it so that there's more cereal than milk, so that it's a bit sort of gloopier, and it does just change the taste and mix it up a bit. Although on that note, I absolutely never have room temperature milk because that is disgusting. If variety is the spice of life for us, why not for our geckos? The results of this experiment for my line day geckos were actually quite different because these geckos do seem to really prefer having the food dry, which was a little bit unexpected. Now, I've sort of come up with the idea that perhaps this is because day geckos in the wild are known to eat a lot of pollen, and I suppose leaving the food dry, it's sort of a bit more like pollen in texture, if you know what I mean. And so perhaps they prefer it like this just because it is more like what they've evolved to eat out in the wild. Therein, I suppose we can draw the conclusion that when we are deciding what to feed different animals, we should probably look at what they eat out in the wild and try and replicate that. Now, I know some people are going to argue that ground up fruit is nothing like pollen, but you see where I'm coming from. So yeah guys, I think that answers the question. I know this is probably going to have ended up being quite a short video and it's really quite concise, but that is because this experiment has really been quite binary in what it's shown me. That yes, you can feed Crested Gecko diet without adding water to it, but then in answer to whether you think it should be fed dry, well, I think there's no harm in trying it to spice up your gecko's life with that all-important variety. So anyway guys, if you did enjoy this video, then please subscribe to the channel to see some new content in the near future, and also like this video and leave it a comment because that does help us out a lot. But until the next video, keep following nature's example and I'll see you then. Bye guys. And while we're at it, chores out of brumation. So, if you've been missing this little fella running around and causing mischief in the background of my videos, he is now here. You might have heard him scratching at things during the course of this video, but whatever, I'm glad he's back.